Okay. I also have to practice a little bit on how to handle this. Okay. Hello, and also from my side, I'm Hendrik Wendler. I'm the curator of the Genius Loci Weimar Video Mapping and Media Art Festival. Thank you very much for this invitation. It's the first time that I'm here at the Poznań Design Festival. And I would like to talk about in this because I was really inspired by this topic, go local, because like our festival is called Genius Loci. So locality is in our DNA. Genius Loci, if it's not, maybe it's really familiar to you, but it's an old Latin expression. It means the spirit of the location. And it's really like 2,000 years old. And this is we have in Weimar, we have in our park made by Goethe himself, that sculpture. It means a genius huius loci. It means the spirit of this very much location. And we took this as an overall festival name and claim. And our task is to visit the various locations in Weimar and to every year create a selection of these places and put this to the artist community and to give them the opportunity to create their reflection of the spirit of this very location. We've been doing this since 2012, and we went through a lot of places in Weimar. Weimar is, I will give you a short brief introduction into Weimar. Yeah. Weimar is a relatively small city. It's called in the very center of Germany. It's about 100,000 people. But regarding its cultural heritage, it's really huge. It's been huge because actually the story of Weimar begins with a failure. The failure was the Duke of Weimar. He had a much bigger resource in the landscape, but he lost the war. And so all his assets and resources, all his area was severely diminished, very small. And then they decided for a strategic reason, because they had no political or military power anymore, to go for culture. And this was some 500 years ago. It was Duke of Ernestine. And this turned into some kind of an art and culture strategy that still works until today. And each year we have some kind of a motto. So like it's being Reformation, or it's like being like Goethe and Schiller, the golden times of Weimar, the silver times of Weimar, Franz Liszt, and a lot we will see upcoming up till the Buchenwald and Bauhaus. And they did this very deliberately by inviting well-known, globally known artists like Goethe and Schiller at a time to go there from Weimar and be creative and be visible, be seen on the whole world by this very point. This is how they created the brand of Weimar, and they started this some 500 years ago, which is very interesting. Weimar itself is a very, very classical place. You will go there, and it's for many people just like it's an outdoor museum. It's fantastic. It's really beautiful. This is the old castle of Weimar, being at Belvedere. This is the Herzogin Anna Amalia. Sorry. This is Herzog Duchess Anna Amalia library created by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe himself. He created this after it was the old one became too small. And this is our most two famous writers. It's Goethe and Schiller. These two, they were standing in front of the German National Theater. And this is a view inside the Goethe house. This is where Goethe used to live and to work for more than 30 years. He was invited to Weimar to come there, to be a poet, to join in and to be a part of the government as well. And as maybe you know, he, after 10 years of working in Weimar, he left for Italy. And he was there for a certain time, and then he came back, and he was the one who brought the Renaissance architecture, culture, and art to Weimar. And then he displayed this in his house, and then he started creating this Renaissance architecture on north of the Alps for the first time. This is also one of very famous figures that was present in Weimar, Johann Sebastian Bach. And this was also another musician. He was a real pop star at that time. He's a Franz Liszt. He was also living for a long time in Weimar. He was by the Dukes. Um, and this is also a very, very famous figure as a philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche. He was also living in Weimar, dying in Weimar, and all this heritage is kept in Weimar. There's also an interesting building built in the 1940s by the National Socialists to keep this heritage. And now it's under redevelopment and rebranding. It's a very interesting story by itself. And this is now, it gets really interesting. This is Henry van der Velde, Belgian designer, and he was invited by another person from Harry Graf Kessler. He was a figure that was in the late 19th century very active about bringing the first impressionists to Weimar, and he brought Henry van der Velde. Henry van der Velde, he redesigned the Weimar Mal- und Zeichenschule, and so he completely reinvented the way from historic painting to a modern art school, and he brought Walter Gropius to Weimar. This is a brief showed how the Bauhaus was founded. So in 1919, the Bauhaus was founded in Weimar. They were there active for, unfortunately, for a very short period, because from 1990 to 1923, when this building was made, this is the Haus am Horn, one of the modern example architecture from the Bauhaus ideology to display how modern architecture could be. And unfortunately, until 1923, then the National Socialist Party took over in this in the Thüringen area. This is the building of the designed by Henry van der Velde, and he designed this. You see, at this first it was Art Nouveau, Art Deco style, and he was the first to bring this design, this style, into the Weimar region. And you see in the architectural details, for example, if you take a look at the windows, some kind of construction elements into architectural design. This is the very first beginning of this modernist architecture. And this was one of our first video mapping festivals that we made the Genius Loci of this Bauhaus school, which was very well adapted by artists worldwide. So this is another example from our festival. This is the new Bauhaus Museum. The new Bauhaus Museum that was built in 2019 to celebrate 100 years of the Bauhaus, and this was it's a very modernist building, and this building was for example, it was built like to make a place where people do not only learn about the history of the Bauhaus, but also go inside and learn how to integrate and do some kind of there are workshops inside. So you learn how to think like the Bauhaus. And so we put this for a competition, and we invited for artists, and there is for example, this one, it's a work by Jonas Denzel. He's an artist from Germany, from Karlsruhe, and he interpreted this building as a percussion and guitar instrument. So these stripes, which are built into the building, he turned into strings, and these hands you can see here moving, they're playing it just like a drum box. So this Bauhaus idea to make art for everyone, it was turned into some kind of a visual representation during this festival video mapping. This was on it was the music school in Weimar. It's a HFM, it's the music of Franz Liszt. And this was also one of our first projects. And it was by the Turkish artist group Nerdworking. And they, for example, interpreted this spirit, this Genius Loci, as the voice and the music from Franz Liszt shouting out of this building. So this is how you can see it. It was really beautiful to watch. With the time, we visited a lot of locations, and then we started going even to locations where there's no building at all, just because we were interested in about the Genius Loci. So, for example, this year, it was 2016, we went into a public park. This public park, we had, for example, this bridge This bridge was a very interesting mapping project because like it's running on the water. And so for the first time, the people, the visitors were standing on top of a building. You can see it in the shape on the top. So the visitors were part of the projection object itself. Then we went even further and created shows where things are not even able to, we had no building to project on. So we started creating like the water walls to project on. And this is for in the Ilm it's the so-called Stern, and it's a old Baroque park. And this old Baroque park, it's like there is an old tale where the witches come out of the river by night and they take over the lonesome wanderer and pull him into the water. And this is by Vanessa Hasenbredel. She made this in this year. It was very beautiful. So there are some impressions from that projection. So then again, we went even further. About this is if you see this stone, this sculpture in the middle, this is the East-West Divan. It's a sculpture about the dialogue of East and West by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Now we didn't project at all. We just made, if you see these black blocks, this is a huge array of sound speakers. And inside these sound speakers, we could create a 3D sound array. And within this 3D sound array, we can create a travel, or the artist created a travel from east to west and back, just to give you the auditive impression of changing between different localities. It was a very successful project. So this was Same by Night. And of course, we were multiple times at the German National Theater. This is German National Theater, this facade. You know, it's a place, it's a very iconic for Germany because this is the place where the Weimar Republic was founded in 1919. And of course, we celebrated this in the year of 2019. Of course, all this bright history was always taken over also by the bad guys. In the 1940s, via the National Socialist Party, really, they really liked Weimar because of all this history, and they wanted to take over all this, and they want to rebrand it for themselves. So they went also to all these iconic places, like here, having it with now you see in the background, it's a greeting. It's a greeting, and it was the first time, this is the day when the National Socialist Party took over in Thüringen. This was the day when they started to make real problems to modern developments like the Bauhaus. This is the day when they took over power, and it happened exactly in front of this same theater. And this theater now was, it got a special entrance for the National Socialist elite and everything. And even worse, this is, for example, this is Schloss Ettersburg. This was a very, very beautiful castle outside the city of Weimar. This was well, many of the first dramas from Goethe and Schiller had their premiere, where they showed it for the first time. And exactly at this location was very iconic for that time. And exactly at this place, this was only a few hundred meters away. The National Socialists built the concentration camp Buchenwald. So it's really like giving a statement for this. Actually, the camp was first supposed to be called the Camp Ettersburg, but then the Goethe Society and everybody made a protest, and then they turned it into the Camp Buchenwald. So else it would be known as Camp Ettersburg today. So. And then some more atrocities the Nationalist Socialists made. For example, this was a place, the new National Museum in 1930. And then there was a so-called Gauforum was planned and built. And you see on the top right, there is this museum. It was built by a Jewish architect. And now you see here in this, you see the cursor. This is the new area, you know, this Gauforum. It's a National Socialist gathering place, supposed to be. And this is at the top left. This is how they pushed away and how they restructured the whole place into something in their view of Germany and a gathering place. So This was a so-called mock-up opening of this space. And this is how most people from Weimar just keep this in memory, the old people. And unfortunately, this place is huge. It's so huge. It's still up today. We have this architectural situation. And so, like, for example, you see that there is these huge buildings here and these blocks. And this is supposed to be the gathering hall there. And then above here, this place where the mass gatherings should be take place, they made a huge parking space. And this huge parking space, they made for a reason. There was a, here you see this trench. This trench, it brings light into the parking space, but the real reason is to make it impossible for all times for anyone to gather there at this place again. So it was a time in the 1990s when everybody was a little bit scared about the reunified Germany, and also like we had a lot of not so beautiful events in the right wing taking over, and this was scandals and pogroms and something like in the 1990s when they made this design. So they made some kind of an architectural decision like this. So for us as a festival, it was very challenging and very interesting to go there and bring the people there again. Because this area now today, this, let's say, this architectural decision to make it impossible to use this place ever again was so successful that this place doesn't exist anymore in public conscience. You know, the people just ignore it. It doesn't exist. When you go north from the city, from Weimar, you go north, you go across the space, and suddenly you are at the train station. This is something really like that people don't know. So we brought them all back again with a huge projection, made like this, and once again tell the story about all this and bring them to this space and reflect there the city, the story that happened here in Bartoldi. And this is by an Italian artist group, Mamma Sonica, which did a very, very good job there. It's called Zoetropolis. If you ever happen, just Google it, Genius Loci Weimar, Atrium, Grauforum, you will find this video. It's a very good example how to work with a place like this. They made some interviews and with old people who remember the place when it was built and how it was built and how it was marketed then and how it is used today. Some impressions from this project. So these are some thoughts that we got during these years and decades of working with historical sensitive environments. It's like what you can do with this, you can create emotional connections to the past. You can bring locations back to the people's minds, and also you can bring the stories back to this. And you can combine architecture with video and audio. This is really interesting because you can suddenly put on a narrative. This is really like a way of making AR, augmented reality, but in a way for a public audience it really works. You can illuminate hidden narratives. We put people's focus on things they see daily, you know, but they see it with new eyes. It's really interesting to see the feedback there. And also like you can revive history and you can reach new generations because new generations have new styles of visual language or what they expect, you know. So like this architecture is permanently, but then again, within, you know, every decade, every generation, you have to tell it in a new way, to use a translation between their visuals or their expectations and the things they see. And also they can create a lot of emotions, mood, and also very important, a kind of an attitude. The potential pitfalls is like you shouldn't go to such a place and just do a documentation or simply retell the past. You should also always create some kind of an attitude and emotion for the people to live to take with when they go. You know, it's also like you have to be very careful to not create misinterpretable images or make an uncanny ghost ride. So this is like when you go to such a location like this former atrium, it's very easy. We had a lot of submissions, like having some kind of a, have a swastika which is destroyed. So the narrative in the story is very clear, but imagine somebody takes an image while there's only the swastika displayed and publishes this. So you have to be really careful what you're doing and how you're telling this. And also another thing is like you shall not falsify or oversimplify the history that happened at these places. So with a simple black and white attitude. So and so with all this uh, experience we had from these fields before, we went to a very, very interesting and challenging historical site. It's the Buchenwald Memorial. This was in the last year, and it happened to know this project as a total. Like last year, we had maybe we have a lot of really, really big and dangerous right-wing voters now in Germany, and we went there last year, and in Thüringen, in this county where we are, where these they are about to gather the majority, just like 100 years ago, which is really scary. So we went exactly at the election weekend at this place, and there we made a projection on the Buchenwald Memorial to remember the people about the past that also happened. It was a very successful project in itself. And this is the door. Actually, what is interesting, jedem das Seine, it's a bit cynic, it's German. It means to each what it belongs to, And what is interesting about this, you can do some kind of research. There was an inhabitant of the Bauhaus Buchenwald, of this camp, and he was a Bauhaus designer. And he made this font. They didn't know from the camp, so it was just some kind of a, let's say, hidden feature. So this was the camp. At the time, it was when they had the biggest existence. And in the top right, you can see there is also a lot of industry, where it's now where they built planes, bombs, and all weaponry. And this camp, at its biggest extension, it has some kind of let's say some 60,000 inhabitants. So it was actually bigger than the city itself. But still, the people from Weimar pretended as everything, all of this didn't exist at all. So it was a pretty wild story. And this is the memorial. The memorial was built in 1958. And this memorial, it was built after these three mass graves were found. Actually, these two were found first. And during the creation of this memorial, they found a third one, this one. So you see that this way suddenly took a curve to visit also the first one. So this architecture in itself, it's very debatable, because this architecture was built in 1958, and there was the GDR, and there was the communist German government, and they depicted themselves to be the better Germany. We overcome fascism, we are the good Germany. So, but then they themselves built another power, architecture of power. Because this is really not like an architecture which goes into the horrible destiny or life that the inhabitants of this camp had to live through. This is an architecture who shows we are the better Germany. So it's really, so still today we have a lot of problems with that kind of history. Also here on this, when you go down, there are 7 larger stele with a relief on it, and these stele, they tell the story of the camp. 7 of them, because 7 years the camp existed, and of course the story is told in a way that GDR tells the story. So there's a lot of really not so correct things. So for example, they talk about a freedom made by communist fighters and guerrillas, which simply didn't exist. So the camp was not overthrown by communist guerrilla. The camp was overthrown by the American army coming over the hill. So this is what actually happened, but you won't see this. So you won't see any American soldier here on one of these reliefs, which is actually a big part of the story. So, but we went there, and so you see one of these huge mass graves. Nobody actually knows who is buried there. It is said to be Hungarian Jews. And this was our first. sketch to propose to the city of Weimar. So they give us funding for this project. So you see the way it's like you go down here and then you go along all this way here, and there is this so-called Street of Nations. So each of these stele is for some nations. It's like Belgium, France, and all just in an alphabetic order, which is a bit strange. Nobody understands really why. So, and then you go up to this Buchenwald tower, where there's a bell that rings every hour once. This is during the festival. So we had once again actually this Italian artist group Mamma Sonica. They made this artwork. So they made a projection on each of these reliefs, which is very interesting, because with the techniques of video mapping, you can control light and shadow in a virtual way. So you can project on a relief, and it's not only light. You can start pointing into certain areas and telling stories and emphasizing certain things, which is really interesting to see how the narrative of this relief is told once again. And then also they developed an overall narrative across all 7 of them. Here's, for example, the story of a little boy. It's actually a true story. He was 3 or 4 years old, and he was kept by the prisoners of the camp. It's Allein unter Wölfen, alone under wolves. And this boy was just hidden by the concentration camp inhabitants until he was released after the war. Then there was across this Street of Nations, there was this German artist group called Area Composer. They made a show called Empathy. Empathy was a displaying on this architecture, on this really like these pylons. They take somehow they resemble some kind of a Roman Egyptian architecture with a fire falls also on it. So it's really disturbing, actually. And so they started projecting the inhabitants' little details and stuff people had to use in their daily life. So, for example, like having a glass or a pen or something, a toy, all included with a huge soundscape. It was pretty interesting, because it was very massive, a very 300 meters projection. And then on the top we had this from the French artist Marine Conter. She made a beautiful animation, hand-drawn animation, about a poem from Rilke, about Die Stille, called. It's the silence. And this poem is about how people who come under the tension of the war are cannot, a couple, young lovers, cannot able to find each other and touch each other and find time to be together. So this is some impressions. And to finalize the talk, I would now show you a video. So, thank you. That was my talk.